There are 7.5 billion living souls on planet Earth. How could we all possibly be relevant? We are all relevant because within each of us is a custom-built, unique story. We are all significant, we do matter, and I'm going to prove it one amazing story at a time. My home province of Ontario makes up 0.2% of the global population, and we're going to start there. One day, I will call on you. Sarah Hannam went from high-strung executive to high-strain enthusiast. To find out how this transformation occurred, we have to start at the very beginning. So, Sarah, where were you born, who was there, and how did that go?
That's a good question. I'm a rural girl. I grew up in Brooklyn, Ontario. I was born 4 pounds, tiny little baby, month preemie, and my parents brought me home, and I'm not sure they knew what to do with me at first, but I thrived. I had a great childhood, a great community, uh, beautiful people that shaped who I am now.
Right.
And I've always been a go-getter. I was a girl guide growing up. The be prepared sort of motto always took to heart, and I was eager to take on life.
Nice.
And
So, what were your parents doing in Brooklyn, Ontario?
well, my dad was a custom farmer,
Mhm.
and then he worked on farm machinery growing up. My mom was a homemaker, and she also worked full time from home. She adapted her life so that she could be home with us to grow up. So I really got the best home life I could growing up.
Nice. You lived on a farm in Brooklyn?
My grandparents were sheep farmers,
Mhm.
so that was a great time. And my grandparents, both my grandmothers were both big vegetable gardeners. So I grew up walking down the paths of their veggie gardens and being able to pick my own fruit and veggies freely and snack away as I went. And as a child, I didn't realize how much work went into that, but I got to experience firsthand the enjoyment of producing your own food
Nice.
and enjoyment of that.
Right. So, is that farm still there?
It's not actually. It's now a development. We were
Brooklyn.
down on Anderson Street, and basically the family farm that I lived on is now home to thousands of people.
Right. Yes.
So it's a different landscape now, and I guess once I hit 18, things were really changing around the GTA, and I am a sort of a quiet nature girl to begin with. And I just had this urge to get out and find my independence, and I moved north. I moved to North Bay, and I loved it up there. Like, it's a beautiful place. And my parents, it was really hard on them because we were a close knit little family,
Right.
and I went 3.5 hours north to go away to school. And so it was hard. It was a transition point for me then,
Yep.
because I'd grown up with a very sheltered environment, and then I went away and I was given the freedom to all of a sudden make all these decisions and meet people that I'd never experienced in my life.
Right. You will find all kinds in North Bay.
Yes, and that was it was. I guess it was a different place because you're so isolated up there.
Right.
I saw things that to me were sort of hard to take,
Mhm.
but at the same time, it's a beautiful community up there, and it's unique in itself.
It is.
And I loved living there, and I had a great education from the college and university there. I went to school in law and graduated in the legal assistant program at the top near the top of my class.
Nice.
And I was happy up there. It was a great place to be. I had wanted to go to law school, and that was sort of my ideal perspective going to university. But as time sort of went on, my personal life changed, and I met my husband, um, and we settled down. We had two boys, and life sort of changed for me.
Right. Was this
I
still in
found
North Bay?
Yes. So my
Okay.
first son, Jack, was born in North Bay.
Mhm.
And pretty much as soon as he was born, I wanted my family back. I wanted to be back home. I wanted to be close and have the support of my family. And I very quickly felt isolated in North Bay.
Right.
So we sort of hightailed it down to the Kawartha Lakes region fairly quickly. And we settled down. We found a cute little house in town, and we had our second son, my son Parker, and it was a good life. We sort of struggled a bit because it was a new community, and I was on maternity leave when we moved there. So it's hard to find friends and get connected to your community that way.
Right.
So I sort of struggled a bit with my mental health when we first moved down here. And that was a lot to do, I think, with the lack of connection to my new community.
Right.
And my family were there and everyone was supportive, but I found that connection hard, not having close friends and that with the same interests as me.
Right.
Close.
The relationships that you built up on your own to make you...
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as much as I wanted my family, I had to leave all of my friends and connections and all these people that I had made a life for myself in North Bay. We were
Right.
there for 10 years. So
Right.
it was an adjustment to move back close to family, but at the same time navigate a new community. And so I struggled because my career in North Bay was at its peak. I was pretty much probably the top paid law clerk in the city, and
Right.
that was a great spot for me, and I was happy with that. I'd gone and done my education, but there was something about once I became a mom and we settled down, that wasn't me anymore. And I felt like I struggled between that identity of settling down and having a simple life and also wanting so badly to have a career and mean something.
Right.
And so I was fortunate. I did get into the legal community down here, and they were amazing to me. I got a great job. I was happy here. But unfortunately, in 2016, my life turned upside down. Halloween night of 2016, my husband committed suicide after several years of dealing with his mental health struggles, probably since 12 or 13 years of age.
Right.
I couldn't help him anymore, and I tried, and I struggled with making our life happy so that we could be okay and he would be okay. But unfortunately, everything I tried didn't work, and on Halloween night of 2016, he took his own life.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I was the one who found him. Thank you. And it turned my world upside down because everything that I had built my life on, my brains, my hard work, everything was sort of stripped away from me, and instantly I was a victim.
Yes.
Everyone would see me in my small community that had embraced me, and people would cry when they see me. And it was really hard for me to take because I'd spent my whole life trying to be happy and bring joy to other people. Then people looked at me instead as something synonymous with sad. And everyone just, when they saw me, they wanted to see how I was. It was, how are you? But really it wasn't like, they didn't want to know how I was, like, are you having a great life? It was, how are you, wanting to know, like, how much of a train wreck are you right now?
Yes.
Should we be worried about you? And I didn't like that because I'd spent my whole life trying to be an independent, strong person.
Right.
And it took it all away for me. And plus dealing with my own mental health. Grief
Sure.
is a hard thing to deal with. You don't have any choice on how you deal with it. Your brain decides that for you. It sort of shuts off parts of your brain so that you can get better slowly, almost like a survival mode. But when you're used to having all of your brains, when you're used to having, I didn't write things down in a calendar ever in my life because I knew the exact date and time of my appointment in my head. And then I went to the point where I could leave home and go to the grocery store, and by the time I got to the grocery store, I couldn't remember the one thing that I came for. And it was hard. I became an introvert. Because I didn't want to deal with people. I didn't want people to see me that way, and I wanted to fix myself. I didn't want that to be who I was. And I had to leave my job in the legal community because I just didn't have the mental capacity to do my job anymore.
Of course not, yeah.
And it was hard. It was, everything to me, that was what I had worked for my whole life. And then it was gone. It was taken from me. I didn't have a choice. It was taken.
Right.
And I had to sort of go back to my roots and find what it is that makes me click and what makes me happy. And really what that is plants. I've been a plant nerd for most of my life. I got my first grow set when I was in my early 20s. I bought it secondhand at a yard sale.
A grow set?
A grow set, so a 3-tier light set. They were T10 fluorescent bulbs.
Okay.
And I grew vegetables and herbs on it in my little tiny apartment. And that's that's where I started finding a balance to my life.
Sure.
Because I was high strung. Everything I did, I had to do 110%.
Right.
And starting that little hobby and perfecting that and having the control over that gave me a balance in my life that sort of carried through my whole life.
Right. It's something from your childhood you remember.
Exactly.
And therapeutic.
It is. And so I went back to my roots, like all the way back to my roots. And what I am is a plant-loving hippie, really, at the end of the day. Yeah. And that is who saved me from me. I don't know how to say that, but I was able to reconnect and chill out and become the person I am now. And a lot of that actually also ties into cannabis. And I spent, as I said, a struggle with my mental health through the loss of my husband. And I happened to not have cannabis as an access for quite a few months in the first part of my demise, I guess, or transition. And all of a sudden, a friend showed up one day, knowing that my biggest struggle was probably sleep. They don't tell you this, but when you're grieving, there's a time frame. It's about 3 a.m. And you wake up every morning at 3 a.m. and your brain is wide awake. And then you can't get back to sleep. And you struggle with that. And I struggled with that for months. And I took medications. I took Ativan. I took other anti-anxiety medications. I was given all sorts of things to fix that so I could sleep. And sleep is what you need to repair your brain.
That's right.
And so a friend showed up at my house, and he had some good strain of cannabis. I can't remember. It was some Kush strain. And he was like, I know you don't, this has kind of been in and out of your life forever, but I think you should try this. Like, I think, when you get up at 3 a.m., smoke a doob of this and go back to bed. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever, because cannabis kind of balanced out my life too. So,
sure.
But coming into access with that strain and seeing how it affected me, and then it sort of continued from there. I kept using that as my 3 a.m. go back to sleep regiment until I didn't have that happen anymore. And I started sleeping through the night, and I don't know when that happened, but it happened.
Right.
And
hear that, doctors? We need that on a prescription.
But at the same time, I sort of struggled and kept that in the closet. Like, this is friends of mine that were cannabis advocates and strain connoisseurs themselves coming to me and saying, Sarah, you don't need all that crap you're on.
Yeah.
This will fix you.
Cannabis still had a stigma to it, though.
It did. And for me, it's always been a legality. I came from a legal background. I've dealt with law my whole life, right? And so being that and knowing that, like, legal to me has always been a thing. And I've smoked cannabis most of my adult life, in and out, but more as a social thing. I'd never gone to a drug dealer and bought drugs in my life. Somebody else I knew would always have them. So I didn't have that. Like, I wasn't in that circle of buying drugs.
Right.
But having this push and somebody saying to me, Sarah, this is what you need, try it, was what I needed.
Yeah.
And so I think I want to tell my story because I want other people to see that push and see that it doesn't always have to be done with wine and pills. Like we can, life's stressful, but there's other things, there's other alternatives, safer alternatives out there.
Much safer, yes.
And I think for me, because my mental health struggles were environmental, it was hard for me to be on anti-anxiety and antidepressant medications because I'm a creative personality and I have a constant drive in me that they killed.
Yes.
They sort of took away from me, and I was level and functioning, but I wasn't me.
Hey guys, just a quick call to action break. If you're a podcast connoisseur like myself, you know that a series will have sponsors and advertisers to help offset the cost of producing your favorite show. Myself, I prefer not to bother you with third-party services, but keep it between us. If you find value in it happening in Ontario, maybe you could buy me a Jameson's. Jameson's. I'll cover the overhead, and you get the tab. I'm providing a link to Patreon in the show notes, and it's a really simple process, and the series becomes ours, partner. Okay, so we're just wrapping up. Let's get back to the good stuff.
Yeah, I guess that sort of brings me to where I am now.
You are the buds girl. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
So I think we're gonna have to start a bit again with my roots. And
Sure.
As I said, I have been growing plants. I've been a plant nerd since my early 20s. I bought my first set secondhand and set it up, and it's considered ancient now, like in terms of technology. But it allowed me to learn the basics. It allowed me to learn vegetative cycles and flowering cycles and how the timing works and fertilizers and but at the same time I learned it all with vegetables. Like I learned it with vegetables, and yet all of the access to everything that I wanted to do, which was mostly indoor growing, was only accessible through hydroponics stores.
Right.
Which are kind of an intimidating place. And I can remember I was 20 years old, and I decided I'd been reading things. I'd borrowed some books from the library. And one of the things I'd learned was that the timing was important, and turning on my lights on and off wasn't enough manually. I needed a timer.
Sure.
So I went down to this hydroponics store that happened to be in town, and at the time it was pretty much 50% head shop, 50% hydroponic store. So it was stoners trying to sell you hydroponic equipment, but they really didn't know anything either. And I wasn't a cannabis girl at the time. I was still a plant nerd girl. And I went in and I said to the guy, I'm growing tomatoes in my apartment, and I just want a timer for my lights. And he starts going and he's like, well, are they in a closet or a cupboard? And I'm thinking, like, why do you want tomatoes in a closet or a cupboard? And it wasn't like I was in this total awkward thing where this guy was totally weirded out that I'm growing pot plants in my living room because the code for pot plants in pretty much every hydroponic store is tomatoes,
Right.
because they have pretty much the same nutritional growing requirements. And so we're having a conversation where we're talking about two different plants, and I don't know it until like a day later. I left awkward and confused, and I went home. And I didn't have a timer, and it took me like a few months, I think, before I had the guts to walk into the other hydroponics store in town.
Good thing there was two.
The good thing there was two, and it was my jam. That place was my jam, and I drove those guys nuts with questions through the next the next year or two while they were still in business. That was the other thing, is hydroponic stores seemed to go in and out of business fairly frequently back in the early 2000s. So I spent so much time in there asking these guys firsthand questions, and these guys were experienced cannabis growers. Like, these guys had records for it and things like that. And so I came in there as this like eager beaver ray of sunshine driving them nuts with questions every single day until they were finally like, you're here so much, can you just start stocking shelves while you're here? We'll pay you, like, but you're kind of annoying. In a loving way, you're annoying. And so I sort of, I found my niche, and my people were experienced cannabis growers. But I was a vegetable grower, and to them I was cute, and it was nice that I wanted to learn all these things, but I wasn't a threat at the same time. So, like over the next 10 years, I was very fortunate to meet tons of actual talented growers, and that grow in the dark, and it was an illegal cannabis trade. And I know that market existed in Canada, and I saw it. And I learned from growers, but I never applied my skills. I just picked up all of these things.
Right.
And they perfected my vegetable growing skills. And then, so after my husband passed away in 2016, I switched from being a vegetable market gardener to, I picked up vegetable market gardening to support my family when we moved to Lindsay.
Right.
And then I was left in this spot where I'd always been a functional gardener. I grew things that my family needed. And flowers were never something I wanted to grow, because who wants flowers? They're a vanity thing.
Right.
And all of a sudden, I managed to connect up with a friend who was also a horticulturalist by trade originally. And she wanted to grow flowers. We were both moms. We both struggled with our mental health, and we grew flowers. And we started with, I'd never grown flower seeds before. I'd grown vegetables, and all of a sudden I learned the timing on flowers. And so that was in 2017. And so we started a flower business, a Kawartha Flower Company. And we've been very successful. Our local community has embraced us, and the local flower movement in Ontario is also very beautiful. And we connected with growers all over Ontario that do the same thing as us, and finding a group with similar interests. But for me, like that, I love it, and it's been great, and they're beautiful, and they bring me all of the joy, and they've transformed me back to where I'm happy, and I'm part of my community, and I get to shine and be the person I am again, without the victim part of it and the sad part of it. Like, I get to be me again.
Well, that's amazing.
And so that brings me to my newest venture, which is the Buds Girl. So I realized that, as I said, growers are weird, and back in the day, and hydroponic stores are great places, but they're kind of scary. There's a lot of equipment in them, and in reality, you don't need all that equipment. What you need is someone who can show you what equipment you need to start with. What do you start with at the ground up? And teach you the skills so that you can enjoy it and take off. And for me, my first cannabis plants were when it became legal. I started growing, my partner Blair surprised me and arranged and bought me my first proper grow tent. And we, with a 1,000-watt high pressure, metal halide, and it's set up, and it's beautiful. The technology now is crazy what we have access to. But at the same time, going and purchasing all of that equipment and knowing that what equipment you need is overwhelming.
For sure.
But once you're off and running, it's beautiful, and it's an easy plant to grow, and you'll have a blast with it. Growing cannabis is a new thing for us in Ontario.
Yeah.
The original prohibition of cannabis was 1923. So we're almost 100 years in prohibition, and it left silently. Like, it was an overnight, they threw it onto the prescribed medications list, and it just sort of disappeared out of our culture. And now it's back, and I think it's our chance to make it our own. And in Ontario, we are one of the provinces that is legalizing the grow of cannabis as far as recreational use.
I think
There are
that's
some provinces
yeah.
that don't have that.
No.
There are, I mean, it's legal across the country, but growing it is not something that's common completely across the country. So we have a unique opportunity in Ontario to have our own homegrown product and work with it.
And it's safe.
It's safe. You get to control the whole process. And growing indoors is the most rewarding thing because I can literally tag down to the exact day pretty much that plant will be ready and mature, because all of your lighting, all of your heat, all of your moisture content, everything is completely controlled.
Right.
And you can't do that outdoors. And so it's beautiful, and to teach people to be able to do that and how simple it is really at the end of the day. I can set them up with a plan for success so that after the first 18-week grow that they go through, they should be pretty seasoned grower and be able to walk into the hydroponic store with confidence and say, hey, I need this fertilizer and I need another bottle of this, and know what their supplies look like and what they need throughout their grow.
Yeah.
And it's a unique plant, and it has a unique set of growing skills that go with it. And I think people would have fun with it if they get into it.
Yeah. Well, I love seeing your enthusiasm about it. Something that took you and gave you therapy is something that you get to talk about and work on every day now.
It's
so
my
wonderful.
passion now.
Yeah.
And I think it clicks, and I feel like I'm in the right spot of my life where I finally get to take all of those skills that I've been absorbing for the last 10 years and give them back to people and show them how to grow. And I want people to learn to enjoy it and take it back. It's a medicinal herb at the end of the day that became a drug and then became stigmatized. And now we can go back and privately, happily grow it in our own homes and craft our own products from it. Like, there's beautiful things. You can make butters and tinctures, and it doesn't even need to be smoked. Like, there are so many options out there. And I feel like I see a lot of people that are currently medical patients and that use cannabis quite frequently or for treatment of one thing or another. And I see the costs that it puts out for them too. My own, I have family that take it for herniated disc problems and things like that. And they are on a pretty high dose of tinctures and oils and things that they purchase through a licensed provider. And I see what the cost of that is to them over a 4-month span.
Right.
And it's in the thousands of dollars. You can set up with a a basic home grow setup, starting at like $1,300 or $1,400. And there are plants on the market now and strains that are ready within like 13 weeks.
Right.
So you could have a rotation of plants, and I can teach you everything to provide your own products rather than having to spend all of that money all the time. I'd really like to see an environment where more people are okay with that and feel okay with that. And then go a step further and let's learn how to grow it together.
That's right.
I would love to see people do that.
Me too. Okay, so just to wrap things up here a little bit. So I think no matter what happens to us in life, there's always a little bit of a hopeful romantic inside of us. So you found love again?
I did. My wonderful partner, and it's kind of, I think it's a funny story, and we should probably tell it.
Sure.
My first husband was a Blair, and it was hard. It was, you identify a name with a person, and so just about a year ago, I met another Blair. And at first I met him on Tinder, and we laugh about that too because Tinder is not really.
Everybody has a good Tinder story or
I
two.
know, yes. So I met Blair on Tinder, and his name was Mike, and I was good. We met, and then I found out his name was Blair.
Oh dear.
And I almost ran. I almost did.
Yeah.
I was very close. It was weird for me, and
For sure.
it was again another chance for me to realize that you aren't a name and people are different, and I am so fortunate. My life is great now. Blair has been so supportive of me. He's taken on our boys, and we have a complete family again. And so it's a perfect time for me, and I have this support to now get to do this full tilt and shine and do what I feel most passionately about. So I'm lucky, and thank you to Blair for what he does for me.
Awesome. That's so great. Well, thank you so much for coming in. I'm really happy to see where you are now in
Great.
life.
And I hope if anyone's in the Kawartha Lakes and Peterborough region that you check me out. The website's thebudsgirls.ca, and we're on Instagram and Facebook as well. But check on by, and I'd love to hear from you.
I'll have all the links in the show notes, so people that are listening can find it right here. I think that everybody should be growing their own. I think if you're a parent out there listening and you have children that you know are smoking marijuana, wouldn't you rather know where that marijuana is coming from?
Exactly. And to take that magic away from it. Like if your parents are growing something in your backyard, how cool is it really? Like, I mean, I grew up with things in my backyard my whole life, and they aren't, they might not excite them by the time they get to be a teenager. And,
right.
If they see the plant and demystify it from the beginning,
right.
It's a different environment. It gives you a chance to talk to your kids about it from before they get into it.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah, and then they get to see that it's just another wonderful part of nature.
Exactly. That's what it is.
It is.
And thank you so much for telling my story, and I hope that it does help other people.
Me too. All right. Thank you, Sarah. It Happened in Ontario is recorded at Treblecock Studio in downtown Peterborough. For more information, go to treblecock.ca. Thanks as always to my dear friend Paul Thompson for the music.
I've blessed others, been blessed in return. I've seen